everybody, my name's Dr Ellie and I am a feelings doctor, and today I wanted to tell you something about your mind and your brain, because I wanted you to understand about how super clever your brain is and how many things it can help you with. I think, sometimes we can find our brain is bothering us a little bit. Sometimes, even though it's super clever and does all these amazing things for us, helps us in school maybe, or helps us think about really cool games to play, or helps us when we're talking to other people, sometimes it gets a bit stuck, or it gets a bit slow because it's really full, and then it can bother us a little bit. And then it's hard to remember that because it's so super clever, there are some really good things it can do that can actually be quite helpful. And I have this brilliant book here. It's called Your Mind is Like a Garden. And its author is a feelings doctor just like me. She's called Shona Ines. And 5 Mile have said that it's okay for us to talk about her book. And in her book, she talks about how sometimes your brain gets a bit full and busy like this. And she says that your mind is like a garden. Did you know that? And the reason it's like a garden is because there's lots of different pathways. Look at this brilliant picture of this. There's lots of different pathways in your brain, and you've got a choice about which pathway you go down. And sometimes you might want to go down, I really need to think about this because it's bothering me and I need to kind of work it out a little bit. And sometimes you might think, actually, I don't want to think about that so much today because it's bothering me and I'd like to think about something else. And so then you can go down a different pathway. And it might be that that pathway is still there and you might have to go back to that one another time. Or a bit like a garden, sometimes you can change what the flower beds look like, what the areas look like, and what the pathways are designed like. And you can do that by choosing about the way that you think. There are 2 different ways to look at lots of situations. So take the one that we're in at the moment, where we're all in our own homes and we can't see anybody else. You could think, oh, this is so rubbish. I can't believe that I can't see anybody else and I just am so fed up with it. Or you could dig up that pathway and change it a little bit, and you could think, yeah, do you know what? This is rubbish that I can't see any of my friends, but I can message them and I can draw them a picture and I can put it in the postbox next time I go out for my exercise. Or I can ask my mum and dad if I can talk to them over the computer. Or I can write down all the things I want to say to them so that when I do get to see them again, I'll remember all those things. So there are different ways to think about exactly the same situation, and you get a choice about that because your mind is your garden. The other way in which a mind is like a garden is that if we pay attention to looking after our mind, it's a bit like helping the garden to grow. And one of the ways that we can do that is by just have time to have a look at what's in our head without stressing about having to garden it. So this is what I mean. In your head, you have all these thoughts. They're growing like flowers and they grow all the time. And they're growing up, and some of them are beautiful flowers and some of them are maybe weeds and some of them are getting in the way of the other ones. And what happens quite often is that we pay attention to one flower. So we get one thought and we think a lot about that. And then we might miss all the other flowers, all the other thoughts that are growing up in other parts of our garden. And one of the ways that we can just sit and pay attention to all the flowers without getting sucked into paying attention to just one is just to do something called fairy breathing. Now, the reason I like this for gardens is that if you imagine you're a fairy and you're hiding at the bottom of the garden and you don't want any of the humans to find you, you would breathe very gently and quietly, and you would flutter over the garden, just looking at everything was there. And if you breathe very gently and quietly, like that, could you even hear me breathing then? If you can do that, then you can have a look at all the thoughts that are coming into your head. I've been doing something recently. When I go out for my exercise every day, there's one place on my walk when I stop just for half a minute and I take a deep breath. And then I take another deep breath. And by the time I take the second deep breath, I can hear the birds singing, the ones that I haven't really noticed because I'm so busy walking and I know that I've got to get through my exercise and not be too near other people and all of those other things. But I can hear the birds singing. And then when I carry on walking, I can still hear the birds singing. And the fact that I've taken that breath and I've just paused means I can hear what's going on. And we can do the same with our brains. So if you want to spot what's going on in your brain, just try that quiet fairy breathing. See if you can make your breathing as quiet as possible so no one could even spot you were doing it. and see what thoughts are going on in your head. And the more times you do the breath, the more things you'll spot. And what you might find is you get distracted and one flower's growing up here and you start to go, ooh, I want to think about that some more. And as soon as you notice that you've been distracted by that, you can go, but I'm just paying attention, and you can pay attention to everything. And that's a way, it helps us to calm down as well if we're feeling a bit stressed, but it's also a way just to get an idea of what's going on in our head. When we know what's going on in our head, we know what we need to do and which paths we want to go down and which paths we want to change. And so it's a good way to start. Thanks for listening, everybody. Bye.